They've been watching you for a long time. Not out of love, out of confusion, out of fascination, out of that quiet unease that comes when someone doesn't move the way the world trained them to. You can feel it. The stares that linger too long, the fake smiles stretched over curiosity. The way rooms fall silent when your presence shifts the temperature. They watch everything you do, and yet they still don't get you. They study your routine like it's a code. They replay your moments like scenes in a movie, hoping the next frame reveals something they missed, but it never does. Because what they're trying to decode isn't behavior, it's energy. And energy doesn't fit inside spreadsheets or gossip circles. They can track your actions, but not your essence. They can copy your words, but not your frequency. That's why they stay obsessed. That's why they whisper your name even when they pretend not to care. You see, most people live like open books, predictable, easy to read, full of recycled stories. But you're not a book. You're a library with no index. You're an entire archive of lessons learned in silence, pain alchemized into power, thoughts too rare for translation. That's why they call you strange. That's why they call you different, because your stillness unsettles them. Your silence forces them to hear their own noise. They mistake your calm for weakness. They mistake your distance for arrogance. They don't understand that silence isn't the absence of thought. It's the presence of control. You're not avoiding them. You're just done performing. You've learned that attention doesn't equal connection, and that not every audience deserves a performance. So you let them watch. You let them analyze, misinterpret, project. Because the moment they look too long, they start seeing themselves. That's the truth of staring into authenticity. It stares back. They want to understand you, but understanding you would mean confronting everything false inside them. And that's something most people aren't ready to do. They call you unpredictable. But that's not true either. You move with intention, not explanation. You don't react, you respond. You don't chase, you attract. That's not unpredictability. That's mastery. They can't read you because you're not broadcasting from the same frequency. You're speaking a language that requires depth, and depth unsettles people who've only ever lived on the surface. They'll keep watching. They'll keep guessing. They'll build theories, attach labels, create stories to make sense of your silence, but they'll never get it. Because you stopped living to be understood. You started living to understand. And once a mind reaches that level of clarity, it stops explaining itself to the blind. So let them watch. Let them record. Let them think they know. Because every time they study your calm, they're staring at something they lost. Peace. And that's what truly shakes them. They think if they watch you long enough, they'll understand you. They think patterns will appear. They think logic can predict movement born from intuition. They don't realize you're not following a pattern. You are the disruption that patterns were never designed to handle. You move by instinct, not instruction. You follow signals that others can't even sense yet, and that's what unsettles them. They mistake your silence for mystery, but it's just focus. They mistake your stillness for uncertainty, but it's just observation. You've learned that the loudest person in the room usually knows the least. You'd rather study the shift than argue with the echo. That's why they don't get you. Because they're addicted to noise. And you've mastered signal. They ask questions they're not ready to hear the answers to. Why don't you react? Why don't you care? They don't understand that caring doesn't always look like chasing. You don't prove worth. You hold it. You don't shout your intentions. You move in alignment. You learn that silence isn't the pause before the storm. Silence is the storm reshaping everything in its path. They'll never admit it, but they're drawn to you. Your mystery frustrates them, but it also fascinates them. Because while everyone else is busy performing, you're simply being. That's what makes you powerful. You don't crave attention. You attract gravity. You don't chase validation. You radiate certainty. They thought if they looked close enough, they'd find cracks in your calm. But what they don't understand is, your calm is the strategy. It's not emptiness. It's precision. It's knowing when to move, when to vanish, when to let curiosity eat them alive. You've become the paradox they can't escape. The lesson that keeps replaying itself in every version of their reality. They'll try to define you. They'll argue over what you are, but mirrors don't explain. They just reflect. And every time they come looking for weakness, they find truth instead. Their own. Your silence walks in before you do. It carries weight. It bends the room. People don't even understand why their pulse quickens when you arrive. They just know something in them shifts. It's not unease. It's not admiration. It's awareness. You radiate that quiet energy of someone who's been through storms but came back with current in their pulse. That's what they feel, even if they can't name it. You don't have to speak to change a room. Your stillness speaks for you. The ones who crave control feel it slipping. The ones who depend on noise realize how powerless they are in silence. Because silence isn't empty, it's full. Full of everything you've seen, everything you've learned, everything you've endured. They don't hear words, they hear experience humming under your breath. You became fluent in the language of restraint. You learned that saying less makes people listen more. You discovered that real influence doesn't shout, it hums. Slow and steady, like a current under calm water. You don't perform, you resonate. That's why people remember you longer than they expected to. They can't stop thinking about the conversation you didn't finish, the glance you didn't explain, the smirk that said everything without saying a thing. They think you're distant, but distance isn't your wall, it's your clarity. You stopped forcing connection with people who only came to extract pieces of you. You stopped translating your soul into a language that others could misuse. Now, you just exist in your frequency, and only those tuned high enough can meet you there. That's what your aura does. It filters, without effort, without apology. You're not rejecting people. You're refining access. Not everyone deserves your energy. And the moment you understood that, your power multiplied. And that's when the obsession began. Because people crave what they can't access. They can't read your silence, so they call it mystery. They can't define your energy, so they call it intensity. They can't understand your peace, so they label it arrogance. Every label is just a reflection of their frustration. You're not the problem. You're the reminder that they've been living small. Your aura doesn't ask for respect. It commands it, without a word, without demand, without force. That's what real presence does. It shifts gravity. It makes everything orbit differently. And those who live on pretense can't survive your atmosphere. Because truth doesn't coexist with masks. They'll keep coming back, hoping this time they'll figure you out. They won't, because your silence isn't meant to be solved. It's meant to be felt. It's the final exam that the world keeps failing, over and over again. And every time they leave, they'll say the same thing. I don't know what it is about them, but you'll know. It's peace. It's clarity. It's power disguised as calm. It's everything they lost when they traded depth for attention. That's your silent aura. The glow they can't study. The energy they can't clone. The shift they can't predict. It always starts the same way. Curiosity. They say your name softly at first, like it's just conversation. But curiosity turns into fascination. And fascination turns into obsession. Because people like you don't just walk through life. You echo through it. Your absence speaks louder than their presence. You didn't ask for that power. But energy like yours doesn't need permission. It leaves a fingerprint on everything it touches. They start watching you closer. They analyze the smallest things. The way you pause before you speak. The way your eyes hold still when everyone else flinches. The way you stay calm when pressure should break you. They confuse discipline for mystery, and it drives them restless. They replay your words, searching for meaning. They scroll your silence, searching for cracks. They imagine your thoughts because they can't read your reality. You became their riddle, one they can't stop trying to solve. They think you're cold, but it's not coldness, it's precision. You stopped offering warmth to those who only come close to steal it. You stopped explaining to people who twist your words into tools. You mastered the art of invisible moves, power that flows quietly, leaving results that speak for themselves. And that's what they can't handle. How someone can influence a space without trying to control it. They start to mimic you. The tone, the timing, the stillness. They copy your style but never your soul, because energy isn't cosmetic. It's coded. You can't fake presence. You can't rehearse truth. That's why imitation always collapses. They don't realize your aura isn't built from aesthetics. It's built from endurance. From nights no one saw. From trials no one praised. Their obsession turns to unease, because no matter how much they study you, they never find the formula. They don't understand that your power doesn't come from perfection. It comes from self-awareness. You've made peace with your shadows. They're still running from theirs. That's why your calm unsettles them. You remind them of what they refuse to face. You don't need validation. And that alone is rebellion in a world addicted to applause. You're untouchable because you're uninterested. You're not playing the same game. And that drives them restless. They'll test you, provoke you, try to break your rhythm. But every attempt just exposes their lack of it. Because people obsessed with control can't stand those who move with freedom. They'll call you intense, unpredictable, even strange, because your peace doesn't bend under pressure. But what they call intense is just depth. What they call unpredictability is just authenticity. What they call strange is just evolution. They haven't reached yet. Let them watch. Let them whisper. Let them confuse admiration with envy. Because every time they talk about you, they reveal one thing. They can't stop thinking about the energy they'll never match. You live rent-free in minds that once tried to erase you. And the irony, you don't even notice anymore. Because obsession doesn't exist at your frequency. You've outgrown the need to be seen. You're too busy becoming. Somewhere along the line, they stopped watching you for curiosity and started watching you for clarity. Because the more they looked, the more they saw themselves. And that's what shook them. You didn't expose their flaws. You reflected them. Every time they stared too long into your calm, they met the parts of themselves they buried. You became a living mirror, one that never lied, never distorted, just quietly revealed. You didn't ask to be their mirror. The world made you one. Every betrayal polished your surface. Every disappointment sharpened your reflection. Every silence turned into glass. You learned that the only way to see truth was to become it. And now that truth sits in your eyes, quiet, unblinking, too heavy for most to face. They can't understand why your peace feels like confrontation, why your stillness feels like a storm. It's because your energy doesn't argue. It exposes. It doesn't attack. It reveals. You don't need to defend yourself when everything around you rearranges itself in your presence. You've become the test they didn't know they were taking, the truth they didn't know they were avoiding. They start changing their tone when they're near you. They filter their words. They lower their volume because they feel it. That your silence listens deeper than their sentences. You don't react, but you register. You don't respond, but you remember. That's what makes people nervous. Knowing that you heard everything they didn't say, they try to project their insecurities onto you, to shift the weight, to regain control. But projection bounces off mirrors. You don't absorb their chaos anymore. You reflect it back, clear, undeniable. That's why they distance themselves. It's not because you're harsh, it's because you're truthful. They'll call you emotionless, detached, cold. But if they looked closer, they'd see it's not emptiness. It's mastery. You've trained your emotions to serve you, not sabotage you. You've learned that empathy doesn't mean exposure. You can feel deeply without revealing everything. That balance, that control, is what they can't copy. You've become what they secretly wish to be. Centered. You don't need payback. You don't crave understanding. You don't chase closure. Because closure arrives the moment you stop reacting. You've reached the level where everything either aligns with your peace or exits your path. And that's not loss, that's refinement. You are no longer the one searching for reflection in others. You've realized you are the reflection, the proof that growth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "I'm done explaining." And now they'll keep watching, not because they hate you, but because your evolution shows them what healing looks like. You're living the version of peace they once pretended to have. They wanted to study your power, but they ended up studying themselves. And for the first time, they didn't like what they saw. It hits them one by one, slowly, deeply, undeniably. The realization that what they mistook for luck was actually precision. What they called arrogance was actually alignment. What they thought was silence was strategy. They thought you were disappearing, but you were just distancing from noise, from drama, from their limited vision. You weren't avoiding them. You were evolving beyond them. They start to see it now. How every time they laughed behind your back, the universe was quietly setting up your stage. How every door that closed was just redirection, not rejection. You never begged for access, because destiny already gave you keys they didn't even know existed. You didn't force your rise, you grew into it. And now that you're here, their confusion looks a lot like regret. They're realizing something deep, that you didn't need validation to become valuable. That your peace isn't a mask, it's armor. That your detachment isn't disinterest, it's dominance. You learned that power doesn't come from being seen, it comes from being certain. You stopped proving your worth and started protecting your energy. And that single shift changed everything. They used to think your kindness was weakness. Now they see it was strategy. Because it takes strength to stay kind in a world that feeds on noise. You were never naive. You were disciplined. You watched, learned, adapted, while they were busy performing. They thought your silence was ignorance. But silence is just patience in disguise. And patience always wins long games. Now they see it. The distance wasn't rejection. It was elevation. You weren't walking away. You were walking up. Every level you reached thinned the crowd. Every truth you accepted thickened your armor. Every test you passed rewired your instincts. That's why they can't keep up. Your evolution isn't personal, it's spiritual. And the moment they realized they couldn't decode you, they started feeling uneasy, because people feel unsettled by what they can't categorize. You're not the hero, not the villain. You're the variable that rewrites the story. You don't fit the mold because you melted it. You don't chase belonging because you became your own place. That's the realization they'll never say out loud, that the one they overlooked became the one they orbit, that the person they dismissed became the standard, that the same calm they called ordinary is the same calm they now crave. You didn't need payback. You became the reminder, the lesson that growth in silence is louder than validation in noise. And that's the kind of power that can't be explained, only felt. Because what they finally realize is that while they were studying how to win, you were mastering how not to lose yourself. They thought you were just surviving the storm, but somewhere along the way, you became it. You stopped waiting for peace to return and realized peace was something you carried inside you all along. The same chaos they hoped would shake you turned into your workshop. Every thunderclap became a rhythm. Every flash of light, a revelation. They were bracing for downfall. You were rehearsing for dominance. See, the world doesn't prepare for people like you. It prepares for followers, not thinkers, for workers, not architects, for imitators, not innovators. And that's why your rise felt like a glitch in their system. Because it was. You're the line of code that rewrote the whole script. You're the variable they never accounted for, and that unsettles them. Because the shift you became doesn't follow forecasts. It writes them. You used to think collapse was loss, until you learned that some things have to fall apart just to expose the blueprint beneath. You learned that endings are just redesigns in disguise. That silence isn't surrender, it's calculation. And when you finally spoke again, the ground didn't tremble. They did. Because your words now carried the weight of lessons absorbed through storms survived. They'll never admit it, but they respect you now. Not out loud, not publicly, but privately. Deeply, quietly, you've become the proof that resilience isn't loud. That power doesn't need noise. That grace can exist inside grit. They used to study your fall. Now they study your rhythm. You've become a new kind of weather, uncontainable, unforgettable. You move without announcement. You arrive without warning. Yet your presence always shifts the atmosphere. The universe recognizes you now, not as a wanderer, but as a force. Not as someone surviving the storm, but as the reason it exists. And here's the part that no one saw coming. You don't even need payback anymore, because your existence is the correction. Your success is the echo. Every story they twisted about you now dissolves in the light of your reality. Every person who doubted you now learns the price of underestimating silence. You don't chase validation. You generate it. You don't crave understanding. You command it. You don't need to explain your frequency to static minds. Your results broadcast it for you. That's the evolution of a storm that learned to smile. So when they whisper your name now, it's not out of mockery. It's out of memory. Because no one forgets the shift that didn't just pass through. It rebuilt everything in its path. You are that change. The one they studied. The one they'll never fully understand. Because you didn't just survive the chaos. You became its calm. And the world. It finally caught on. The forecast changed forever. The moment you did, when the dust settled, when the noise faded, when every storm finally passed, they expected you to be exhausted. But instead, you were glowing, calm, alert, untouchable. The chaos that broke others became your compass. You didn't just survive the storm, you learned its rhythm. You started reading the pattern behind every thunderclap, the meaning behind every silence. That's why they can't reach you anymore, because you no longer play by visible rules. You don't chase approval. You don't even chase clarity. You are clarity. You've become the eye of the storm, calm, centered, surrounded by motion, yet perfectly aware. They mistake that stillness for weakness, but stillness is the highest form of control. You've mastered the art of letting energy speak before words do. You walk into rooms and everything adjusts. The temperature, the tone, even the people pretending not to notice. You see it in their faces, confusion mixed with recognition. They can't explain it, but they feel it. Your aura no longer seeks space, it creates it. Every version of you they thought they understood has already evolved into something new. You're a moving code, unreadable, unpredictable, unstoppable. That's why they whisper your name like a password, unsure if they're supposed to respect it or follow it. You didn't just grow, you outgrew. Environments, habits, people who once defined your worth. You realize that not everyone who claps is happy for you. Some just want to confirm you're still performing, so you stopped performing altogether. You became presence itself. No script, no mask, no validation, just truth. And that truth is magnetic, because when someone walks in full awareness of who they are, the universe rearranges itself around them. You don't chase alignment anymore. You attract it. You don't fight resistance. You let it reveal direction. That's what evolution looks like. Not louder, but lighter. Not more aggressive, but more precise. They used to watch you to find your weakness. Now they watch you to find themselves, because somewhere deep down, they know If they could understand how you move, they could understand freedom. But what they don't realize is, freedom can't be studied. It has to be earned. And you, my dear, earned it the long way. Through silence, through shifts, through solitude. Now when they speak your name, it's not with mockery, it's with memory. Because legends aren't born when people believe in them. They're born when disbelief no longer matters. So sit there, calm, quiet, untouchable, not because you're above the motion, but because you became the rhythm that guides it. You're not the echo anymore. You're the source. There's a strange quiet that follows your name now. Not the kind that forgets, but the kind that remembers too well. It's the silence people use when they realize they're standing in front of something they can't categorize. You became the variable that broke their equation. The glitch that taught the system humility. And now every time they speak about strength, every time they define resilience, your shadow crosses their definition like a signature they didn't expect to see there. You don't walk with noise anymore. You move with presence. Every step echoes the discipline it took to reach this stillness. The world used to measure power by volume, by noise, by chaos. But you proved that the loudest storm is the one that speaks in whispers, because real power doesn't announce. It arrives, quietly, precisely, unshakably. They don't say it out loud, but they check for you, in trends, in timing, in tone. You changed their rhythm without touching them. That's the kind of influence you can't buy, can't fake, can't replicate. You became the standard. They all pretend not to measure against. Every creator, every rival, every doubter now moves according to the silence you set. You taught them something the world rarely admits, that peace is power, that restraint is control, that self-awareness is the highest form of strategy. You didn't win by shouting louder. You won by seeing deeper. You stopped reacting. And that's when everything started reacting to you. Your evolution turned into their fascination. They replay your moves like a file written by genius. No matter how many times they analyze it, it never opens the same way twice. Because what you built wasn't a routine, it was a frequency. And only those tuned high enough can even hear it. They said you'd fade out. Instead, you burned through. Through lies, through labels, through limits, you dismantled the illusion that people could define you, because you were never built for their categories. You're not predictable enough for envy, not fragile enough for pity, not ordinary enough for imitation. You're the one thing they can't manage, and that unsettles them more than failure ever could. Now when they see you calm, it confuses them. They mistake peace for pause, not realizing calm people end wars without lifting a hand. You're not seeking payback anymore. You've evolved past that frequency. You don't need to prove you won. You are the proof. And that's why your echo stays. Long after you leave the room, long after they stop pretending, they don't care. Because you didn't just walk through life, you rewrote it. You didn't just outlast their storms, you became the blueprint for balance. So remember this, my dear, you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to redefine what fitting in even means. The world called you unstable. The universe whispered, untouchable. And that's where your story begins. Not in noise, but in the silence only legends can command.